everyone, so here's how I made these little dress slacks for Henry's second Christmas. Of course, they would look adorable for other dressy occasions like weddings or what have you. Henry. They are made out of navy cotton velveteen, and all the materials as well as timestamps are linked down below. So to get started, I took the shorts pattern from the Children's Corner Classic Boy collection and just lengthened them. I am a big fan of using the patterns that you already have and maybe just altering them a little bit so you aren't storing every pattern under the sun and you can buy more fabric and goodies instead. I'm using tailor's chalk to mark my new line since this is dark fabric. To make my new pattern, I'm using the slightly curved area of this French curve to lengthen the side of the pant leg, and then the straight side for the other side of the pant leg. And then finally I just draw a straight line to connect the two, kind of making sure it's, perpendicular to the bottom edges. And I rinse and repeat the same thing for the other half of the pant. One thing to note is that I'm cutting out that little tab closure for the moment, but later on I will cut it off to make room for the waistband that I'm going to add, and I will explain more when I get there. So I briefly entertained the idea of lining these pants with some lightweight batiste that I had left over from another project, but I didn't go that route since I thought it was complicating matters. Instead, I took this Hug Snug tape bias band stuff. It's a super handy notion to make Hong Kong seams or otherwise enclose a fabric's raw edge, especially when it comes to thicker fabrics like velveteen. At first I joined the crotch together and then put the Hug Snug tape on each side of the seam, and I'm folding the Hug Snug tape over and giving it an ironing. I'm trying to offset one side of the tape about like a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch so that I can sew with the shorter side facing up, and then I'm ensuring that I'm catching the longer side underneath my fabric, where I can't see it, into those stitches. Like I said, I joined the first seam and then put the Hug Snug tape on each side to enclose those raw edges, and while it wasn't a huge issue, I did find it easier to apply the Hug Snug tape first and then put the seams together, so that's what I did for the rest of the garment. And when I got to a corner, like the corner of this crotch, I just lifted my presser foot and folded that extra in a little bit to create a miter, so it would go neatly around that curve, something like this. Sorry, Henry is very talkative. Then I sew the other crotch pieces together and press that seam open. And next I sew the legs inside seam together. So I'm going from the bottom of one inner leg around that crotch area and then down the other inner leg. And the crotch area does benefit from having some clips around the curves, so that's what I did. And then I sealed up the raw edges of the velveteen and the Hug Snug tape with some melted beeswax. And next I joined both of the outside seams of the pant leg. So at this point the pants are all together and I'm going to move on to the waistline. I thought it would be absolutely adorable to have two pleats on each side of the front of the waist. So I'm eyeballing the pleats to my liking, and any extra fabric that I may need to take up for fitting purposes will be done in the back of the pants. So I base those front pleats in place and then I move on to the waistband. I cut two back bands that were plenty long, and I will cut off the extra later, and then 3.5 inches wide. I'm going to turn up each raw edge of the bands about 1/4 of an inch, and then when I attach it to the pants, I'm going to fold the band onto itself like in half and then sandwich the pants in between the band. But before I can do that, I put some interfacing onto the side of the band that will be facing, on the outside of the pants. And then one last touch is making these little belt loops. And I'm not going to lie, they were a little bit of a pain, but I think they are totally worth the adorableness. So to make them, I took some of the velveteen right sides together and sewed along about 3/8 of an inch wide, which means my belt loops will be about 3/8 of an inch wide. So I trim up the extra and then I turn the velveteen right sides out. And this part is a little bit tricky, but it does work. So I attach a needle and thread to do the turning. So I know they make tools for this, but I don't own them, and I've been using this needle and thread method for as long as I can remember, so Here we go. The initial turning is the tricky part with thicker fabric. It's good to have a nice clean cut without any frays, and then it can be helpful to use some tweezers or a seam ripper, just something with a small end to help push the fabric into the tube, just to start the turning process. Remember, once the initial turn is established, the rest becomes easier. So just be patient and drink some wine, and it'll eventually turn, and you'll be able to pull the loop of fabric through onto itself, making it turn right sides out. And now we've got this nice length of belt loops. So I take the belt loop to my waistband, and I'm thinking around 1 inch in length would look good. So I cut my loops to about 1.5 inches, so I would have 1/4 inch to turn under on each end. And to attach the belt loops, I marked their placement with some tailor's chalk. And I turned one end under about 1/4 inch and sewed that into place with very tiny stitches. And then turn the other end about 1/4 inch and again sew with very tiny stitches. And I rinse and repeat for the other 3 belt loops, and voila! How adorable is this? Then I attach the waistband to the pants, first lining up the one side seam and then continuing to pin around. Remember, this waistband is sandwiching the top of the pants, so I find that pinning is helpful to keep everything lined up while I'm stitching. And then I just stitch around the waistband. Henry. And then I stitch the waistband to the top of the pants. To finish up the machine sewing for the waistband, I need to create a little tab area. Remember, I cut off the tabs from the original pattern since I added the waistband to the design. So I'm ripping some stitches out from the top of the side seam, and then I will back tack again just to secure that, that leg side seam up again. And I want to leave an opening here of about 1 inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, something like that, depending on the size that you're making. Then I trim the tab on the front, so there's about 1/4 inch of overhang, and this 1/4 inch will get tucked in, and I will sew that down along that length. That's how I'm going to conceal those raw edges, and it will look something like this, all flush with the front of the pants. Meanwhile, the back tab of the pants is going to have some overhang so it can bend behind the front of the pants waistline, if that makes sense. So I'm cutting it about 1 inch away, and then I am tucking the raw edges at the end about 1/4 inch, and then continuing the fold from the bottom of the waistband to enclose those raw edges. I start to sew the bottom of the waistband, and then I put my needle down and turn the corner to continue sewing up the waistband at that end. And I will hand sew some snap closures, and the last little bit is to hem the pants. I turned up the raw edge about 1/4 inch, and then again about 1 1/4 inches to fit my little guy. I pinned that in place and gave it a pressing before sewing the hem down via my sewing machine. And I think these pants are super cute, and I love them for any fancy occasion, but you could definitely turn them into some casual pair of overalls by sandwiching a shirt into the top of the waistband. There are so many options without having to buy another pattern under this. Buy every pattern under the sun. Anywho, I hope this video was helpful. If y'all have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time. Oh, Henry, we got through it.